Now, Donald Trump has, even during his first term in office, has been calling for European countries to shoulder more of the responsibility. Now he's finally getting what he wants.
That's right, Delano. I really think that one of the things that's very well likely to come out of this summit, as Kedevan kind of suggested there, is that it's a huge victory for Donald Trump, not only in the logistics and the way that it's been made very uncomplicated, like Kedevan was just saying, but also in the pledges and the flattery that have been made, quite frankly, for Donald Trump. Now, this 5% increase pledge has been confirmed now. It's something that came from Trump. But as Kedevan mentioned there, the flattery is something that seems to be a little bit more organic. It's especially coming from Mark Rutte, and it's something that he was asked about time and time again.
Shocking, yeah.
Yeah, really surprising, including from other NATO members. What's interesting about that, Delano, I think, is to see how different the alliance is framing itself compared to when Donald Trump first took office again in January and now. Initially, prior to his arrival, there was a lot of talk again about European sovereignty, of getting Europe to be able to provide for its own defense, becoming autonomous, not relying so much on the United States, especially as it appeared to be more unreliable and unpredictable under Donald Trump. A few examples, Delano. Back in January, Poland's prime minister said in an address to EU lawmakers that they should not ask America what it should do for our security, but you guys need to ask yourselves what we can do for our own security. After that catastrophic meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky and the U.S. president and vice presidents, that's when Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer created and led that infamous coalition of the willing, which is, of course, aimed at taking peace, diplomacy, and coordination efforts outside of the limits of NATO with a potentially unpredictable Donald Trump in office. There was even talk for a bit about that Franco-British nuclear protection for the continent if the United States was no longer reliable on that front as well. But all of that is really very absent, not only from when we heard from Macron, Starmer, and Rutte today. None of them really mentioned any of that focus on European sovereignty and independence explicitly. It was a lot of kind of either flattery or just emphasizing how much they need to work with the United States in order to secure their own security. So we'll see how sustainable that is, quite frankly, from a domestic political perspective, not only in terms of what these budgets are going to demand of European countries and other NATO countries, but also in terms of how likely they are to accept this kind of flattery and caving, so to speak, to Donald Trump.
That's true. We haven't heard about the coalition of the willing for quite some time now. I want to ask, when it comes to Ukraine, for instance, the U.S. has been shouldering a lot of the responsibility. Donald Trump, we don't know what's going to happen. He says he's supposed to meet Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky, who obviously wants to keep that issue on the front burner, understandably. If, for instance, Aaron, the U.S. Steps away, can European countries fill in the void left by Washington?
It's an interesting question, Delano, especially because, again, it seems to be completely absent, especially if you compare to a lot of the rhetoric that we were hearing when Donald Trump first took office. For now, just to give you some perspective, according to the Institute for Strategic Studies, 46% of the European continent, in any cases, fighter jets are American-made. 42% of its missile systems are American-made. 24% of its armored vehicles and 23% of its artillery. So that means that as little as a quarter to as much as nearly half of all of the continent's weapons remain U.S.-made. Now, France is the only country to buy more equipment from European countries, whereas Britain, Germany, and Italy still get most of their equipment from the United States. And this goes beyond sheer quantity, Delano. Often U.S. weapons are clearly simply better. There's a hint to that at one of the announcements that Keir Starmer made just moments ago, which is that they're going to buy 12 additional U.S. fighter jets. Aside from Germany, France, and Italy, the U.K., and perhaps increasingly Poland, there's not a huge domestic defense industry in most of these countries. And this is something that takes decades to build. So while all of these leaders have been trying to kind of emphasize how good this will be, how good this spending increase will be for the European continent, for the NATO alliance and the European continent by ricochet, the reality is that it doesn't appear that any of them will be any less reliant on the United States.
Indeed, that seems to be the case, and we are getting news that the meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Zelensky has gotten underway. But it was kind of telling during that family photo, Aaron, which was taken earlier today. We had a lot of the NATO leaders present, but someone that was absent was Vladimir Zelensky, who has been present at all these meetings. And then in comments earlier today, just a short while ago, from the NATO Secretary General, he said that Ukraine was on an irreversible path towards NATO, but then again, not at the photo. So it's kind of telling. We'll see what comes out of that bilateral meeting. Stay with